So for this next one, you need to repeat the open seam again. This one is attaching a bit of binding and then inserting boning, and this is specifically for the corsets that you're making. So start the same as normal, reverse at the beginning and end. Okay, and then cut that off. Then what you're going to need to do is press that open exactly the same as you did for the open seam, and it should look like that. Okay, and then you're going to get some of this, which is called bias binding. Now the bias binding has two sections here, and it's folded over, so it's actually one big piece like that, but what's happened is it's folded over like that, so it's got a folded edge on both of these sides. Now we used bias binding to insert boning. Now at the moment, if I'm laying that over top, I can see that there's still going to be bits of the other fabric underneath. So what I'm going to do is get my scissors, similar with the French seam, and trim along those. And then what should happen is I should be able to put my piece of bias binding over there, which will then cover it over. So I've cut down my seam here, and what I'm getting is my bias binding. I'm measuring that along so I don't cut myself too much. I'm cutting just the section I need. Now the middle of my bias binding should be roughly central with the seam, and I'm going to pin this way along here. Like that, and then I'm going to start sewing. So with this, what you are doing is you're attaching a smaller bit of fabric to a larger piece on the back. Now when it comes to this, you will need to be very, very careful that your sewing machine does not push this bias binding too far. It's useful to go in the same direction on both sides, so you're not pushing it in different directions. I tend to start with the needle in the sewing machine, reverse stitch at the beginning, so going along, reverse stitch, so you're right on the very edge of this bit of bias binding. I think maybe that's not as clear as I'd like it to be, but what you can see here is the bias binding. The light on the sewing machine is reflecting a little bit, so along the edge all the way. When you get close to it, take out the pins, carrying on, taking out the pins again, and when you get to them, all the way to the end and reverse again at the end. Pull that out of your machine. Then we are doing the same thing again, and we're doing it down the other side, so you should be able to see my line of sewing already. So along the other side, reverse, sew all the way along, making sure that every section is secured. Right, lift that up, pull it out. Now what you've created here is a channel, that you guys are then going to insert your boning underneath. So what you need to do now, I can look at mine and think, oh, actually maybe these were not as central as I would have liked them to be, but what you need to do is just reverse at that beginning.